Hey everyone, my name is Ben Awad, and I am a sophomore computer science student at the University of Texas at Dallas. Now, this summer I will be interning at Bank of America as a software engineer, and I want to make this video to explain how I got my internship. The first thing I did was apply for the job through my school's job board. Now, what I did is I just put in my resume, and then about a week later, I heard back. They were like, we're interested in you. Could we set up a phone call with you for an interview? And so maybe a week later, we had the phone call, and they basically just did a little phone interview for me. Now, what they did is they asked me questions, some behavioral questions. For example, I think one of them was, "Hey, have you ever worked in a team? How did that go?" And then after they did some behavioral questions, they were like, "We'll give you a little technical questions." I guess this is what they called technical questions. First, they asked me a few Java object-oriented stuff, like what is encapsulation, what is inheritance, that sort of thing. And then they got into asking about databases. Nothing too fancy, like what is a foreign key, do indexes speed up searches, and that sort of thing. Pretty basic stuff. If you're familiar with databases, that is. And then actually at the end they were just like, "Do you know what a for loop is?" So it was actually kind of confusing why they asked that at the end. But anyway, yeah. So I did well in that phone interview, and then they were like, "Hey, we want to do a follow-up phone interview. Here's how it's gonna work. So we're gonna give you two, basically people that are gonna interview you. The first one is gonna call you, and then you're gonna get a 5-minute break, and then the second person is gonna call you back to back." And so I was like, "Okay, sure." All right, so I get the first phone call, and we chit chat for a little bit, and then he's like, "I have a technical question for you." And he asks me about two files. Both are about like 1,000,000 lines long, and they have different stuff on each line. He basically wants to diff the two files. Is there any lines on the first file that's not on the second, or vice versa? So he asked me, how would I do that? So the first thing I told him, and I just said, this is the first thing that popped into my mind. I know this is not the fastest solution. But I'll tell you anyways. First thing I thought of. So obviously you could do a for loop through the first file, and then each line you run a for loop through the second file, and you're like, is this line in that file? And if it is, you say, okay, there's a duplicate here, or there's not. But this ran an n squared time, and I told him that. He asked me what the runtime of the algorithm was. And then I was like, but I know of a faster solution that we can do. And that is to run through the first file and add each line to a dictionary or a hash table. And then do a for loop through the second file, and each line look it up in the dictionary, and see if it's there. And that's one way you could diff the two files. And he liked that answer, and he asked me what's the runtime of the algorithm. And to look up something into a dictionary, it takes O of one time, and then you're going through a list twice, but you're not stacking for loops. So I told him it was O of n time, and that was right, and he was happy with that solution. And then basically I just asked him a few questions about what he did, and that I had about Bank of America, and that sort of thing. And then that was it. I took a 5-minute break, and then I got my second call. Now for my second call, it was a little bit different. This guy just wanted to chit chat a little bit, and then he was like, "Hey, he just asked me behavioral questions." The one particularly he asked me, I remember, is if you're going to learn a new technology, how would you go about doing it? And then I just talked a little bit about how I would do that. Then after that, about a week later, I got an offer from Bank of America, and bam, that's how I got an internship at Bank of America. I think the biggest thing that went well for me is I did well with the phone interviews. Now, phone interviews are a little difficult for me at first, but what I recommend for you guys is to just practice. I did maybe 7 or 8 before I went to Bank of America, and Bank of America went pretty well, I thought, and that's because I felt very comfortable. And you'll notice that once you start answering the questions, the same questions pop up each time you do an interview. And so eventually you actually start memorizing your speech of what you're going to say for an interview, and it makes it really easy. So I recommend just practicing and confidence. Have confidence in what you're saying, and it makes it super duper easy. So yeah, that's how I got my internship at Bank of America. So if you like this video, give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe. And if you have any more questions about the internship process, or any of that stuff, you can leave a comment below and I'd be happy to answer your question. And I'll see you guys later.